We've decided you're not the right fit for this family anymore." The words hung in the air like ice crystals as I stared at my adoptive parents across their polished mahogany dining table. Behind them, my adoptive brother Michael smirked, barely concealing his satisfaction. I set down my fork, the salmon I'd been eating suddenly tasteless. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Eleanor, the woman who had raised me since I was 7, dabbed the corner of her mouth with a linen napkin. "It's been 17 years, Rebecca. We've given you every opportunity to become part of the Harrington legacy, but you simply haven't lived up to expectations." I was 24 years old, and my adoptive family was terminating our relationship as if canceling a disappointing investment. "You have until the end of the month to vacate your apartment," Richard, my adoptive father, continued. The apartment they'd gifted me after college, with strings attached. As I now realized, the lease is in our name, after all. "And your position at Harrington Development?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Terminated, effective immediately," Richard replied, not meeting my eyes. "Michael will be taking over your projects." Of course he would. Michael, their biological son, had spent years undermining my work at the family's architectural firm. Despite my degree from MIT and the innovative designs that had brought in millions in new contracts, Michael had convinced his parents that I was riding on the Harrington name rather than earning my place. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been preparing for this day for years. "I understand," I said quietly, rising from my seat. "Thank you for dinner." Michael's triumphant expression faltered slightly at my calm acceptance. He had expected tears, pleading, perhaps even anger. Instead, I simply gathered my belongings and walked out of the Harrington mansion for the final time. In my car, I pulled out my phone and sent a single text, "Chimera protocol activated." The response came immediately, "All systems go. Welcome to your new life. Ms. Kane, Rebecca Kane," my birth name. Before the Harringtons had adopted me and made me Rebecca Harrington, the name I'd legally reclaimed in secret 3 years ago, establishing a separate identity while maintaining the Harrington facade. As I drove through the glittering Chicago skyline, I thought about the path that had led me here. The Harringtons had adopted me after my parents died in a car accident, not out of love but as a PR move to improve their corporate image. Richard and Eleanor Harrington, philanthropists and real estate moguls, showcasing their generosity by taking in an orphan child. For years, I'd tried to earn their approval, perfect grades, architectural awards, bringing innovative sustainable design concepts to their traditional firm, but nothing was ever enough, especially once Michael graduated and joined the company. As their biological child, he was the true heir to the Harrington empire, regardless of talent or merit. 3 years ago, after overhearing a conversation between Richard and Eleanor discussing my eventual transition out of the company, I had begun my contingency plan. Using my personal savings, I rented an office under my birth name and began moonlighting, creating revolutionary architectural designs that I sold anonymously to competing firms. My sustainable urban renewal concepts caught the attention of investors, and soon Rebecca Kane had a thriving shadow business, all while Rebecca Harrington continued to work dutifully at her adoptive family's firm. The real coup had come last year, when I created Chimera Designs, a shell company that had been secretly acquiring parcels of land throughout the city, land that the Harringtons desperately wanted for their newest development project. I pulled into the private garage beneath a sleek glass tower in downtown Chicago. The security guard nodded respectfully. "Good evening, Ms. Kane." "Good evening, Thomas," I replied, feeling the weight of the Harrington name finally lifting from my shoulders. The elevator required a biometric scan to access the penthouse floor. As I stepped into my true home, a stunning apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, I was greeted by a small team of people gathered around a conference table. "It's done," I announced, setting down my purse. "The Harringtons have made their move." Maya, my chief operating officer, stood up. Once an undervalued intern at Harrington Development, she had been the first person I'd recruited for my shadow company. "All Chimera subsidiaries are prepared for the public launch," she confirmed. "The press release goes out at 9 a.m. tomorrow revealing you as the founder and CEO. "And the Northside properties?" I asked, referring to the land I'd strategically acquired. "Harrington Development submitted their final offer this afternoon," reported James, my legal counsel. "They've offered triple market value, completely unaware they're negotiating with you." I nodded, walking to the windows to gaze at the Chicago skyline. Tomorrow, the architectural world would learn that Rebecca Kane, not Rebecca Harrington, was the visionary behind some of the most innovative designs of the past 3 years, and the Harringtons would discover that their adopted daughter, the one they'd discarded so casually, now controlled the land essential to their company's future. Are you sure about phase 2? Maya asked, joining me at the window. We could stop at the reveal. You've already established Chimera as a major player. I thought about years of conditional love, of Michael's smug superiority, of designs I'd created that Richard had credited to others. I thought about being treated as disposable by the people who were supposed to be my family. The Harringtons built their empire by acquiring struggling companies and discarding the people who built them, I said. It's time they understand what that feels like. The next morning, I dressed carefully in a sleek charcoal suit that I'd never worn as Rebecca Harrington. My entire wardrobe as Rebecca Kane was different, bolder, more confident, designed to command attention rather than blend into the background as I'd done at Harrington Development. At precisely 9 a.m., the press release went live, announcing Chimera Designs as the innovative firm behind several award-winning projects previously attributed to anonymous architects. It named me, Rebecca Kane, as the founder and creative force, along with a brief biography that made no mention of my connection to the Harrington family. By 9:15, my phone was flooded with messages from industry contacts, former colleagues, and journalists requesting interviews. By 9:30, there was a message from Michael. Who the hell is Rebecca Kane and why is everyone saying she designed the lakefront tower? I smiled, remembering how he had taken credit for that particular design at the industry awards last year. I didn't respond. At 10 a.m., I walked into the gleaming headquarters of Chimera Designs, a renovated warehouse in Chicago's trendy West Loop that I'd been secretly developing for the past year. Employees who had known me only as Ms. Kane, never making the connection to Rebecca Harrington, greeted me with excited congratulations on our public launch. At 11 a.m., Maya brought me a printout of an urgent email from Harrington Development to Chimera Designs, requesting an immediate meeting regarding the Northside properties. They still don't know it's you, she said, sounding impressed. They've addressed this to Ms. Kane as if you're a stranger. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow, I instructed. Let them sweat for a day. By lunchtime, the story had been picked up by architectural journals and business publications. The mysterious new firm that had burst onto the scene with a portfolio of groundbreaking designs, led by a young architect no one in the industry recognized, despite her obvious influence over recent trends. At 2 p.m., Eleanor called. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was terse. Rebecca, call us immediately. There appears to be some confusion about your work at Harrington Development. By 5 p.m., as I was reviewing plans for our first public project, an innovative mixed-income housing development, Richard himself was calling. His voicemail was less composed. What the hell do you think you're doing? Those designs were created while you were employed by Harrington Development. They belong to us. Call me back immediately or we'll be pursuing legal action. I handed my phone to James. Please inform Mr. Harrington that all designs credited to Chimera were created independently, outside of my contracted hours with Harrington Development, using my own resources, as he'll find in my employment contract. Any work created on my own time belongs to me. James nodded, a smile playing at his lips. He had helped me carefully document every hour I'd spent on Chimera projects, ensuring nothing could be claimed by the Harringtons. The next morning, I arrived at Chimera's conference room 15 minutes before the scheduled meeting with Harrington Development. I chose the head of the table, my back to the door, reviewing documents as I waited. At precisely 10 a.m., I heard the conference room door open and Maya's professional voice. Mr. Harrington, Mr. Harrington, thank you for coming. Ms. Kane will be with you momentarily. I turned slowly in my chair, savoring the moment as Richard and Michael Harrington's expressions transformed from professional politeness to shock. Rebecca? Richard recovered first, his face hardening. What is the meaning of this? Why are you pretending to be this Kane person? I smiled, gesturing for them to take seats. I'm not pretending, Richard. Rebecca Kane is my legal name, my birth name. In fact, I reclaimed it 3 years ago. Michael's face flushed with anger. This is ridiculous. You're trying to steal our designs and our land deal. Dad, we should leave and let the lawyers handle this. Actually, I said calmly, sliding a folder across the table. These are copies of my original design sketches, time-stamped and notarized, all created outside of Harrington Development working hours. And as for the land, I pushed a second folder forward. These are the legally binding purchase agreements for each parcel, all acquired through transparent transactions by Chimera subsidiaries. Richard opened the land purchase folder, his face growing paler as he reviewed the documents. This is the entire Northside development area. We've been negotiating for months. With me, I finished for him, or rather, with Chimera Designs, which is wholly owned by me. Why? Richard demanded, his voice a mixture of anger and something else, perhaps a hint of respect. Why go to all this trouble? If you wanted to start your own firm, you could have simply left. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. 3 years ago, I overheard you and Eleanor discussing my eventual transition out of the company to make way for Michael. You were planning to discard me even then, so I created options for myself. Michael stood abruptly. This is corporate espionage. You used your position at our company to do what? Exactly? I interrupted. To create original designs on my own time? To legally purchase property on the open market? To establish a company under my legal name? Please, explain which part of this is illegitimate. Richard placed a restraining hand on his son's arm, his business instincts taking over. What do you want, Rebecca? Money? A partnership between our firms? I shook my head. What I want isn't available for purchase. Richard, I wanted a family that valued me for who I am, not what I could contribute to their legacy. I stood, straightening my jacket. The meeting I scheduled with Harrington Development wasn't about negotiation, it was about closure. So you're refusing to sell the Northside properties? Richard asked, his voice tight. On the contrary, I replied, Chimera Designs will be developing those properties ourselves, using my sustainable urban renewal approach that Harrington Development repeatedly rejected. Our investors are quite excited about the project. As if on cue, Maya entered with a tablet displaying the just-announced partnership between Chimera Designs and Wright International, one of Harrington Development's biggest competitors. This is how you repay us? Eleanor's voice came from the doorway, where she stood clutching her designer handbag like a shield. After everything we gave you? I looked at the woman who had been my mother in name only for 17 years. You gave me a name, an education, and opportunities, all with the expectation of return on investment. And when you decided the investment wasn't paying off as you'd hoped, you terminated it. I gestured around the room. I simply did the same calculation and made a business decision. The Harringtons left shortly afterward, Richard practically dragging a fuming Michael from the conference room. Eleanor lingered briefly, looking around at the sleek offices of Chimera Designs with an unreadable expression before following her husband and son. That evening, as I stood on the balcony of my penthouse watching the sunset paint Chicago's skyline in gold and crimson, Maya joined me with 2 glasses of champagne. To Chimera Designs' official launch, she said, handing me a glass, and to Rebecca Kane, finally visible to the world. I took the glass, considering her words. 4 years, I had been invisible in the Harrington household, present but unseen, contributing but uncredited. I had used that invisibility to build something of my own, something authentic. The invisible architect, they're calling you in the press, Maya continued, the designer who created revolutionary buildings right under the industry's nose. I smiled, raising my glass, to visibility on my own terms. As the city lights began to twinkle beneath us, I thought about tomorrow's groundbreaking ceremony for the Northside project, my first public appearance as Rebecca Kane. The invitations had gone out to every major architecture firm and publication in the country, including one personally addressed to the Harrington family. Not out of spite or to flaunt my success, but as a final lesson, I had built something meaningful from the foundation they had tried to destroy. In the end, the family that had discarded me would watch as I reshaped the very skyline they had once claimed as their exclusive domain. Sometimes, the most powerful structures are built by those no one thought to watch.